Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of EOXS's Stories on Steel. This is a steel industry podcast featuring the big names of the business and the advice/stories they've accrued over their years as insiders. Steel has been a vital component to American life for over 100 years, and the men and women who've helped it flourish are a diverse group of innovators full of interesting tales. We hope to share some of said tales here with you today. Thanks again to EOXS for providing this platform. In addition to this show, they are bringing businesses online by providing a standardized digital workspace for all your steel-related needs. Today, we welcome the president of Indiana-based steel innovators Chemcoaters, Mr. Connor McMenamin. Connor, thank you so much for joining us, man. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
There's so much we want to cover today, and it's an impressive amount, to be sure. So to begin, could you tell us a little bit about your company, Chemcoaters?
Yes. So we are a coil coater. People take aluminum or steel coils, sometimes stainless as well, run it through a line, and then we apply a series or a type of coating for them, depending on what they want. We tend to be focused on one of three areas, either a corrosion-related coating, a coating that helps formability, creating a part in a die, or some sort of other forming processing, and then cleaning or retreating. Sometimes a steel mill will have meant to apply coating, and then for whatever reason it didn't go on, we do that rework for them.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about the types of services you provide other companies? Is it specifically coating coils that
Yeah,
were
so
already purchased, or are you getting in after or before they're purchased?
Okay, yeah, so our typical model is toll processing. Someone will buy the coil, bring it to us, we'll apply whatever they want, and then it goes to the end customer. So we don't tend to get involved in the actual buy and sell of the steel or the aluminum. But for example, we're in probably four main markets: automotive, appliance, construction, and then the fourth would be heavy transport or non-passenger vehicles, school bus, truck, whatever.
And what kinds of benefits are there to coating steel?
You can do a lot of different things. One of the benefits on our end is that we're a niche player, so we don't have to work with huge runs. Someone can say, I have a demand, but it's pretty small. Some companies don't want to deal with that or change their line around, set up new products. But ourselves and then a few of our peers will do that same type of thing. They don't really care about the size of the run. But one of the main coatings that we run today was set up for basically all the steel that goes into drywall. Because most of it is non-structural, it doesn't matter so much what mechanical properties it offers. What matters is the corrosion resistance that you can get out of it. So the coating that we developed allows customers to take seconds or off primes, take advantage of a lower cost base material, put a little value into it, and then put it in a wall where nobody's going to see it. So it's kind of like, it's not exactly recycling, but it's creating some efficiencies in the market.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Do you have any way to gauge how much life you're adding or how many years of use you're adding to certain components through this coating? Or
Yeah, so typically we would talk about the maturity of the market or the cycle from production to scrap is something like 30 or 40 years. If we weren't doing this treatment, the steel would go right back into scrap. So we're adding 30 or 40 years. In terms of protection, it might be 5 to 10 times what was originally on there. There's additional processes involved, so it's not a linear, it's not a one-to-one translation, so to say. But
can you speak on any sorts of areas in the coding process where you're speaking about your peers? I assume you mean other companies doing like services in the steel industry. Can you speak on any areas where you feel Chemcoaters are leading the charge and any kind of innovations that you've noticed?
So we are a little bit different in that some of the coatings that we've come up with have been developed in-house, so we control more of our own IP, I would say, relative to our peers. Our peers tend to be um, much more focused on solvent-based paint. So whatever is, going on your garage door or the panels on your house or all that aesthetic stuff, we don't really get into that. We're a little bit more function. Um, so that's the main difference, I would say, or differentiator. Similarly, we're very much water-based. So it's a different portion of the market for the most part.
Let's talk about you for a little bit. What is your, sorry to plug the title of this podcast, but what is your steel story, if you wouldn't mind sharing? Just like what
It's
led you to the steel industry?
yeah, it's a bit of an odd route in, but I graduated in 2010, and most of the world had not yet recovered from the financial
Financial
crisis.
crisis, yeah.
So the strategy was get the door open somewhere, anywhere, it doesn't matter, get a job.
Yeah.
Um, and a family friend was working at Tata Steel, which is now a much more recognized name than it was maybe 10 years ago in the US. And I started as an intern, and they continued to give me opportunities to grow and take on new challenges. One thing led to another. Um, I was in Brazil for 3.5 years, back and forth, and then Mexico for almost 4 years.
Oh, muito bem.
Yeah, muito bom.
Muito bom.
Yeah,
Como vai
so
você?
vou bem, tudo bem.
Obrigado.
Very good, very good.
I
So,
do. I moonlight as a Brazilian jiu-jitsu player in my free time, so that's I
oh, there
picked
you
up a
go.
few phrases here and there.
That's pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it was kind of just a series of, odd occurrences, one after another, that led me to this. And then after about 10 years with Tata, my family was involved in this company, and they said, "Why don't you come home and help us out?" And I'd been abroad for the better part of 7 years, so I was ready to try something new, and I still have good links with the folks at Tata.
Yeah, so just because we haven't yet gotten the chance to cover a whole lot of the steel industry abroad,
Hmm.
what was the what was the market like in Brazil? Like, what exactly was your job over there?
I was in market development, and it was almost impossible to develop business in most areas down there based on I would call it, um, it was a fairly closed economy at the time. They were not letting most deal in, or if they were, there was a heavy duty to be paid. So we were stuck to very specific segments. On the other hand, people in Brazil really like to chat and meet new people. So the cold calling wasn't so cold.
That had to be an interesting change
Yeah.
of routine for anyone who's
Yeah.
had to make cold calls, definitely.
Yeah, as in the U.S. we're a little bit different. We just like to move from one thing to the next, and in Brazil it's more, okay, we like you, we'd love to buy from you, but our situation is such that it doesn't really make sense. So it was kind of the reversal of a lot of cold calling type work.
Can you tell me more about what made you want to come back? If we could round to that point again.
Hmm. Well, I had been abroad for almost 7 years, and to be fair, in Brazil I was moving back and forth, so I wasn't really in one place or the other.
Hmm.
And then after 4 years in Mexico, it had been a while, and I wanted to try something new, and to get the chance to work with my aunts and my father was kind of fun. It's like an interesting dynamic.
And so, wait, so your aunt and your that they were uh, they were at Chemcoaters, if
Well, so we
that's
are. Yeah, I guess I should have included this in the beginning. So we're a
okay.
family-owned business. There's a series of
All right.
families that make up the ownership, and my stepmother's side has a participation, or is an owner of part of the company. Um, so I was able to work with family. And my father's in sales. My grandfather was in sales. My brother's in sales. My sister's in sales. They're probably all better than me, but um, it's fun. It's a new dynamic or a new dimension of the family relationship.
Well, I mean, that can, depending on the family dynamic, that can either lead to a lot of cohesion or a lot of a lot of stress, and I'm not going to pry too
Yeah.
much, but it seems like it's a very beneficial arrangement.
Well, there are definitely moments of stress, but we all want the same thing. And I think at the end of the day, we kind of know who each other are. So there's a lot of trust, and even in the tense moments where we're saying we got to do this or that, and someone's really passionate, it comes from the same place, and it's trying to get to the same place. So everything in the middle is fine.
What was your role like right after you got stateside? What were you doing with the company? Were you immediately put into the president position, or were you working in sales like a lot of other people? Or
I was I hit the ground running basically, but my first 6 to 9 months was really just listening, because you've come into something that has a history of its own, and every company is a little bit different. So who are the people? What do they really care about? What is going well? What is not? And what are the filters? Because everybody has their own view on things, right? So you have to get a broad view and be able to figure out. You have to be able to get to the crux of the matter, but it takes some
did
time.
did you know a ton about the coding process before joining with Chemcoaters? Like, were you familiarized with it at all from your time at Tata, or did you have to learn a lot once you came back?
I had to learn a lot, and I'm still learning a ton every day. Um,
Yeah, it's
thankfully, a
always a
lot of
process.
Yeah, thankfully, a lot of the other people at the company that are managing the departments have been there for 10 years or so. So there's a lot of tribal knowledge that I can rely on.
Since joining with Chemcoaters, has your time there affected your opinion on the steel industry as a whole? Or influenced your opinion about it in any way?
Um, it reminds me how dynamic things can be, and how gung ho we are in the States about, it's kind of quick. It's just very quick. I was used to setting up really complex supply chains, and tax rebates and this, that, and the other. And one of my favorite things about working in the States is that things just work. Things happen. It's done and it moves on, and I love that. Since we are also so niche and we control a lot of our own IP, we do buy from a lot of the established, let's call it, chemical suppliers in the industry that have their own branded products. So we use them as well. But since we have our own ideas, a customer comes and says, I need this, this, and this for whatever reason, we say, yeah, we can try that, which is refreshing.
I think you were mentioning that there was a level of complexity to the supply chains in Brazil.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, so in the most recent um, challenges were in Mexico, because I was Tata Steel was a growing automotive player, and they're very good in high strength steel, automotive, and then the packaging, so like your tuna cans and things like that. And those are all very export intensive industries. So the Mexican government, of course, has set up some sort of parameters that they can best benefit people in those industries. But there has to be a very specific flow from raw material to component to how it's exported, when, under what conditions. And in the United States, it's just, well, I move from here to here, and then this is the way it goes, and that everything works the way it's supposed to. Um,
You mentioned that a lot of the difficulty uh, is not something that you have to deal with at Chemcoders because you control a lot of your own IPs.
mhm.
What are some like so what is the intellectual property looking like for a steel coating industry? Is it formulas? Is it application processes?
It's a
Uh,
combination of both.
okay, all right. So
In this case, our IP covers both ends of the spectrum, because it's very niche. Um, and our peers, they have their own products. I believe they're more on the visual. Off the top of my head, they're more on the visual or aesthetic type paints. And then our own suppliers, they have their branded product as well. So it's a bit of a mix and match. Um, but our this was what I was referencing before in terms of the drywall, metallic components. This is where our IP rests today, because it's just so unique. And when I was talking, getting to know the people that worked here before I had jumped over, they said, well, our product can do this, this, and this. And you kind of say, well, okay, go jump in a lake. That there's no way, because there's just this stuff doesn't exist elsewhere. I haven't heard about it in 10 years. And not even this product, nothing that could do anything like that. So when I got here and I found out that, yes, it's actually pretty true, what we're saying we can do is actually what we can do, it was really exciting.
Now, would you agree with the statement that the steel industry is very traditional?
Absolutely. It's changing, but it's still very much there's a lot of tribal knowledge, I will say. Um, for, I'm still kind of new to the industry at 10 years. Many people that you will meet have been there since their first job 30, 40 years ago. And they can certainly speak to it better than I. But there's a lot of, we rely very heavily on face to face, walking the line, looking at the customer's process, getting into their machines, change this setting, change that setting, whatever. Um, it's different than, especially in our area, when we call on a customer, we might not set the project up for 2 years because they have to go through the whole process of validation and confirming that what they think they're getting is what they're getting. So it's very much get your hands dirty, elbow grease kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of physical proximity and visits and line tours required for that type of work.
So with thank you for that. That's a very, very detailed answer. With that mentality that this is still a very traditional industry in a lot of ways, from your point of view, what does that quest and that constant hunt for innovation look like for, if not the steel industry as a whole, Chemcoaters? Like, how are you guys continuously, because you put a lot of importance on your IPs. Are you consistently, like, what does the research look like? What does the innovation look like as someone who's got to look at the whole board, all the
Mm-hmm.
time?
So there's one of my favorite parts is because we are small and a little I would say fairly agile, we can take a small idea and just tinker around in our own lab for a while, keep costs low, do some drawdowns where you basically, have a small sheet and there's a small rod with, what do you call it, striations or rows in it that allow you to apply a chemical. But it's, you're talking about something yay big. So, we're just tinkering around in our garage and it's kind of fun to see what comes out of that, because some of these ideas that we're working with now that we think are going to be important in 5 or 10 years are just our lab techs playing around with some chemicals. I'm exaggerating and simplifying a little bit, but I think that uh, the world is getting smaller and pressure on almost every industry will increase over time as things get more crowded, right? So material innovation and processing innovation is only going to become more important. So new products or me too's, or we can't take a break, I guess, is the long story
I
short.
think that that is a very good point to bring up the pandemic-sized elephant in the room, and that is, I
Mhm.
feel like, a common theme we're going to be visiting for a majority of these early episodes is the COVID pandemic, the virus currently gripping the world. It's made every industry, at every level, have look for ways to reduce costs. Has it impacted Chemcoaters significantly?
Yes, we are doing better than we were, of course, during Q2. I think everybody has now
Mm-hmm.
seen some recovery, thankfully. I don't know what Q4 and Q1 hold for us. We think gradual recovery is the name of the game. Um, since we are independent and we have a long-term view in terms of how we handle things, there's a feeling that we have to kind of protect everybody under the roof, if I'm saying that in the right way. So we have had an impact, of course, and we have to skin the cat a different way sometimes. But um, we run lean and mean, so we're not really changing anything in that respect.
Have you planned out any more precautions going forward in case of other spikes and second waves? As has been parroted in the news quite a bit lately,
Mhm.
or are you guys fairly okay with the model you have going right now?
We have to update it as things change. We can really only do the best with the information we have, but I think being a little conservative in terms of safety policy is good. Being a little over exaggerated. Um, we've been lucky so far, and part of that is probably a little luck. Part of that is probably policy, um, and I'm curious to see what winter brings. But we just have to. We try to follow what the CDC advises, and a lot of that comes down to personal responsibility because we are together from 6 to 8 or whatever it is. There's a few different shifts, right?
Yeah.
But then everybody goes home and lives their own life. So we try to communicate that it's both parts of the day matter in terms of protection.
100%. With how much, like, even more in-person industries have had to retreat and transition to online, has Chemcoaters online presence had any sort of beneficial impact on keeping the company in a good spot? Like, have you had to put more attention onto your online presence or online advertising in any way?
Definitely. Um, I was a little skeptical about how we were going to do things, but as we move through this pandemic, what's clear is that we're going to be in it for some time, and nobody knows when the end is. So we have to do something, right? And I think we, just like many others, are going to be beefing up our online presence. I think what is really important is that a company says something when it has something to say, um, in terms of just blasting the market, because then you start to lose attention, or people are not as interested in what you have to say if it's just words. If I'm
No,
making
I
sense.
think that speaking softly is very important,
Hmm.
especially with how volatile online interactions can be, even from
Yeah.
corporate accounts and brands. It's a very new territory for everybody. Have have you recruited accordingly for do you utilize an in-house marketing team? Do you use a company or an outside firm? What does that look like?
Ah, so we deal with an outside firm, but the challenge is then to kind of bring them into our scope or into our way of working, so that even if they're external, they really kind of have their finger on our pulse, and they can be, instead of just a vendor, creating ideas and helping us. So a bit of both.
I just would love to pause for a second and say, Connor, as somewhat like earlier, you remarked on your entrance into the steel industry was a little unorthodox given the financial crisis
Hmm.
currently happening, and there was this need for anyone graduating at that time to just go out and find work. So you seem incredibly natural with this position, and you have worked at it for a long time. Did you have any sort of original plan for work, or like before you entered steel, or was it more see what
Oh,
happens?
well, I had wanted to go into the FBI or the Foreign Service, and
Wow.
I well, they were lofty goals, and I did terrible at the tests. I was I did so poorly. And I think because I had studied overseas, and of the people that were in my class that also took the test, I think I was the only one that failed. So that taught me something, then and there. I needed to do a little bit more pre-work in some of these major life-changing events. But we learn, right?
Live and let live. I always
Yeah.
say, if it was supposed to happen, it would have happened.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you gotta look at things like that. Let's kick it back to your specific part of the industry.
Mhm.
For a few times now, you've brought up your contemporaries, like not by name, but just the other people offering coding
Mhm.
services. Have you had to look at, as someone who entered this position and hit the ground running? You learned a lot from your family and Chemcoaters. Have you had to learn from mistakes that other similar companies have made, or have you mainly focused on what you guys were doing?
Mainly focused on what we're doing. Um, our contemporaries are good at what they do. They have their markets and they operate in it. There might be some overlap, and there might actually be, because we have our own IP, there may be some opportunities to collaborate. So it's, we focus mostly on ourselves, and in terms of the learning, it's more what did we do in the past, how did it go, and why, and then how do we, because we know where we are, and we have our product quality, we have our manufacturer, and now it's about getting more of it into the market. So we're a little more internally focused, admittedly.
Uh, as someone, like, again, who entered a fairly unorthodox way into the steel industry, you had to learn a lot very
Mm-hmm.
quickly in order to achieve success. Was there ever a moment, or a moment when you were still learning, that you were struck by some sort of fact or piece of wisdom in the industry that really got you hooked and instilled a passion in you? Or was there ever a moment where this became a lifestyle, as opposed to just the thing I need to do to make money because the world is currently embroiled in a massive financial crisis, if that makes sense?
Well, there was a few moments, maybe 7 or 8 years in. I think I had been 2 years into Mexico, and I was talking about a trial of a product that was very particular and kind of a pain to to kind of plan out in the supply chain. Required a lot of time, and there were a lot of things that could go wrong. Um, and I was talking to one of the technical people on the other across the pond, and he was a very tough guy, very very good, but very tough. So there was no BSing. And I said, I'm sorry, this is just tough, but this is where we want to go. This is kind of how it's working, and this is why. And he goes, no, this is, you're one of our crack salesmen, so this is what we want. And he might have actually said it in jest, but after like 7 or 8 years, I started to get a few projects going in the areas where we had been working. So I finally felt like, okay, I've got here. I'm here.
Connor McMenamin, top man.
Well, maybe
He's
not
our
top,
guy.
one of many who can get an order on occasion.
I think that in any industry there is that moment where you realize you've broken through. Like
Mhm.
you're one of the guys. Like you're here.
Yeah.
You're not maybe not a fixture, but you are not a novice. You're not
Yeah.
a fresh meat anymore. And
Right.
I think that
Exactly. It was like, okay, I finally.
you've taken your licks.
Yeah.
You're a steel man now.
Time to have some fun.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And now, uh, going back to the family component, we're running low on time, but I wanted to make sure
Of
I
course.
covered this. I'd imagine that, I don't want to assume, but I would imagine that with it being a family business, or a significantly more family business than others, there is maybe a shorthand that exists that otherwise wouldn't in a corporate structure. Have you noticed that the way you communicate with your family in a business setting is different than how you've communicated with other non-family members in a business setting, or is it strictly the same?
No, it's pretty similar, in fact. Um, while I might feel comfortable asking my family questions about things that I wouldn't ask others because, maybe I want to be a little more discreet or something. But ethics, I think, are really important. And sometimes we also get into an area where perception is reality. And it's important to me, and I think for the firm, that there's no perception that there's any, lower standard or any um, wiggle room in the way we need to operate and get our goals achieved.
Have there ever been any funny just stories that have arisen from the workplace by virtue of you guys being family, or has it again been very, very business-like?
No, it's been pretty professional. But then after work the switch flips down. There was one time where I had a very important couple bosses visiting in Brazil, and we were going between two customers, and of course I took the wrong turn because there was a construction site I didn't notice. And this is in the south of Brazil. And instead of taking a nice hour-and-a-half trip down the highway, I took a 3-hour trip through the literal jungle. Uh, and I did not stop hearing about that for maybe 2 years, and to some extent I deserved it. But
What was your end destination, if you don't mind me asking?
we were going to, oh my gosh, Joinville, like,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
we were going from Paraná to Santa Catarina, and then we were going to
Okay.
fly out that night.
Oh man, I would not want to get lost in Brazil.
No, it was very, I was very stressed. But you live and learn, right?
Live and learn. We're coming to the end here, and I think an interesting place to end would be you're coming into a fairly significant amount of time as the president of a company. Have there been any big leadership insights that you've gained from this time that you think it would be important to share with our listeners?
Um, the biggest struggle, or not struggle, but the biggest learning for me has been that at some point people want a decision, and you have to provide the decision, and you have to be right most of the time. Whereas naturally, I'm a little bit more compromising, personality-wise. But as a leader, you have to take a call and then execute on it. And sometimes you're going to be wrong, and but you are the one that has to make the call. So that has been, where I spend most time working on myself.
And I would assume you're not done working on yourself.
No, every day you try and get a little bit better.
That's a very insightful point to end on, Connor. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that, because I feel like a lot of people in every business are always looking for ways to be better leaders, and knowing that journey is never really capable of ending, I think
Right.
is good. It's a constant battle for self-improvement, if I have that right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think the only thing left to do is wrap this up. This has been another insightful episode of EOXS's Stories on Steel. Thanks again to Connor for stopping by. And remember, whether galvanized or hot rolled, EOXS will provide a marketplace to take any steel business to the online sector. Thank you and good night.